Well, there was very little in it, so we should be in for an excellent race.
Time for race 2 here at Knockhill, and where this time I put up a much more respectable qualifying time compared to what I put up in the first session. And once again, Cleland does manage to qualify inside the top 10, but it depends on knowing if he can manage to transfer that result over to the race. So, let's get on with race number 2 here at Knockhill, as the red lights come on. And it's go for race 2 here at Knockhill, and off to a much smoother start than I was at earlier, because I am 8 positions up from where I was in the previous race, and already some contact is made to open up the race as I would have expected, and already up into 6th position, so I'm already up 2 positions from where I started, and I'm just hopeful in saying that whatever happens from here, I do manage to at least clear whatever cars are in between myself and the Renaults. And this Honda is not being very helpful, so I don't really think I have any other choice but to just punt him out of the way, because I know that's what would happen if I was in his position. He would have done the same thing to me. And the 2 Renaults are just up ahead of me, and for once I am going to try and take the chicane in this race a bit more often than I did in the previous race. And fuck. Oh, that just became a debacle. From when I actually thought for sure I was going to be closing in on the leaders, I suddenly just spun all the way to the rear of the top 8. So that basically tells you how well my race is currently going. So I've now dropped back to where I started, which I think is, well, you know, awful. But again, you know, let's see what happens. And yes, it's very easy to cut the chicane, I might add. And just disposing of the Honda, so I can at least get 1 position back from what I lost. And now overtaking my teammate Bintcliffe, who I am quite sure is behind one of the Volvos. And it would seem as though I am going to have to make sure I keep my mistakes to a minimum if I'm going to set respectable lap times to the leaders. Fortunately, Knockhill is one of those tracks that's more beneficial to the player than it is to the AI. So you can probably tell why I have optimism going into Knockhill, or I had optimism going into Knockhill. And yep, I should have known that was coming. It was just a matter of when that became the main thing. Also, furthermore, David Leslie is running right behind the 2 Volvos at the moment. So it is fair to say this is definitely all to play for. So, now starting lap 5 in race 2. Can't really say there's a lot that's gone very well here, but I can at least say I was within an overtaking distance of the two Renaults, and it now looks as though I'm going to achieve that again, because I'm now only 9 seconds behind Plato in the first of the two Renaults. It also looks as though I'm really going to have to get the hammer down for these next couple of laps if this is going to be a race-winning run. And so begins what shall be my march up the field. I'm steadily closing in on Plato. I just hope he is able to give me the room so I can close in on his teammate. He does let me through. He knew I was coming at a vast rate of knots, so he decided he was going to let me through. And he's closing in on me again because I ran wide on the exit. But at least I can say my car still has pace. So 6.9 seconds is now the interval to menu in front of me. I have no doubts in my mind of saying that as long as I don't spin too many times, I will easily be able to close that interval down. And not really bothering to take the chicane at the moment because, well, I'm not in front. And it is fair to say the interval is rapidly dropping to the leader, so I could be within shouting distance if I can manage to keep my shit together very soon. But it is fair to say I'm definitely making more mistakes in this race than I was in the first race. Well, at least I can say it's easy to slice down that margin, because the player seems to have the stronger race pace than the AI does. At least I can say previously I was able to put myself out to a pretty dominant win of 20 seconds over menu, so it's now 9 wins in the first 16 races, and this could potentially make it 10 if I can manage to at least keep my car on track without having any further altercations than the ones I've already had at this point. So 5.3 seconds now the interval, and I'm still continuing to close in on the Renault in front of me. And it now looks as though I am within 5 seconds of menu, and I am closing fast. So we still have a long way to go here at Knockhill, but at the moment at least it looks as though by the end of the next lap I should be the leader. And I should be the leader by quite a long way, in fact. So 1.3 seconds is now the interval to menu. I'm going to make sure I pull this pass off cleanly, or at least try to pull it off cleanly, even though I have no doubts in saying he will inevitably block me. But I still think I can pass him cleanly, or cleanish, I should say. I've now passed menu for the lead. It's also ironic to say that with certain tracks there is a glitch between the two Renaults. Because on certain tracks they technically have the same number, whereas on other tracks they don't. and I'm pretty sure I have now overtaken Menu for the race lead here at Knockhill. I'm now a quarter of a second up, and because I feel like I do want to set a new best lap time here, I'm just going to do what I have been doing. And 0.2 of a second, I'm now above what I was at previously, and I got a much better exit out of the hairpin this time around, and so I now overlap one of the Ford Mondeos and I go half a second faster than my previous personal best. And it now looks as though back markers are going to play a role in deciding the outcome of this race, potentially. Because all I really have to do now is just pull away from Menu and hope that whatever happens, these back markers do manage to hold them off long enough to the point of where I will definitely take the checkered flag. So clearing the other Mondeo now of Radicic, and now trying to see if I can clear Anthony Reid in the Nissan, even though before I do that I end up going straight to the gravel. But at the present time at least, things would appear to be going relatively well, as I am now leading once again. Or I'm still leading, at least. At least that's what I think is happening here, but anyways, still have another 22 laps to go here at Knockhill, and then once I'm done with those 22 laps we can move on to our next venue, which I'm pretty sure is Snetterton. And I really do like Snetterton because, well, to me at least, I think Snetterton is probably one of my favourite circuits in the game. Because, you know, because the track itself is relatively easy to get your head around. It's also a fast flowing circuit, and it's also one of those particular circuits where you get used to it pretty quickly. I also quite like Knockhill as well, but the main problem I really have with Knockhill is traffic. Because, well, the track surface is narrow, and it's also fair to say back markers can also be a really big problem in certain areas of this course. I'm not going to say they're a problem all the time, but they're definitely a problem enough of the time to say you literally have to punt them out of the way just so they do not interfere with your race. And in all honesty, this is probably what the first race would have been, and I just forced Cleland off into the gravel trap. But anyways, overtaking my former teammate now, Derek Warwick, as I am now right behind one of the Peugeots once again, although that's probably one of the Nissans that I am now behind. I'm really putting the laps on these guys. It's also happy for me to say that Derek Warwick has scored more than a single point over the season, even though his teammate Cleland has not scored even a single point at this stage of the season. But it is fair to say we still have a long way to go, and I just went well up the racetrack. I literally went up the banking and straight into the gravel. But anyways, so I will be halfway there by the end of the next lap, as 16 laps are now complete here in race 2 at Knockhill. And I think from here I am going to try and see if I can... oh, for fuck's sake. Fuck my ass. I just cannot make it through that one kink without having a spin. That one kink of a corner just always seems to catch me out. Even when I'm dominating a race, it still manages to catch me out if I try to take it properly. Well, at least it gives you an insight into why I've been cutting the chicane so many times up to this point. I mean, aside from that one chicane, the rest of the course overall, it's okay. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I'd say it's okay to drive once you get used to it. It's just a matter of knowing if you're able to get used to the way the undulation works, from both an uphill perspective as well as a downhill perspective. Also, I'm pretty sure I can see the Scottish Highlands in the background. I mean, a lot of Scotland is technically surrounded by the Highlands. It's probably the one thing that I think stands out about Scotland even more than Edinburgh and Glasgow, which I would like to say are the two main cities in Scotland. And even though, personally, I never have been to Scotland, it's definitely one of those countries that I've virtually begged my parents numerous times to head to. And not just because I've been to Wales so many times, and not just because I've been to Wales so many times in the past. But yeah, I mean, me going to Scotland, it would definitely be one of those experiences I would never forget. Especially if I knew someone was going to be serving me a dish with haggis. Or at least someone showing me the bagpipes with the kilt. These are just examples of things I know that are from Scotland. By the way, I should also mention, it was technically the Scottish who did also give us the first ever telephone. As of which, I couldn't tell you when the year was, but I do know that Alexander Graham Bell, as most of you either do or do not know, he himself was a Scotsman. He's probably one of very few people I could say that was just about as innovative as Edward Jenner or Isaac Newton. Both men I would like to say were very wise in their research. Even though the main difference between all three of those men is that, well, Alexander Graham Bell, he made an invention, whereas Edward Jenner and Isaac Newton, they were known for making discoveries. But still, it is fair to say that whilst we Englanders were at war with Scotland for basically many centuries in the past before we were eventually unified with, mainly with there being the monarchy of King James I, who was originally James VI of Scotland. It's fair to say that when he came over to England, he pretty much unified the two countries and eventually, as a result of his coronation in England, the two countries were eventually unified, and I think Wales also came along with the idea, but anyways, the three of them basically unified, and then I think it was the Acts of Union in 1707 that ultimately resulted in the formation of the Kingdom of Great Britain. And then I think it was less than a century after that where in the early 19th century there had been the formation of England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland, when we officially became known as the United Kingdom and Ireland. You'd be amazed on what sufficient detailing you can learn as well as give to the lecturer when you're in university. But all of these things I do mention are true. Plus furthermore, Colin McRae was a Scotsman, and I think the same can also be said about the likes of Jim Clark, Jackie Stewart, and most recently David Coulthard, who was able to win a lot of races as a driver himself, who competed in F1 for many years over the course of his career. And getting a little bit of a bump draft there from the Peugeot, but I don't think it's anything serious. I still have another 12 laps to go here at Knockhill before the end of it. I'm still hopeful in saying these back markers will not give me too much trouble, whilst I'm trying my damnedest to get as far away from menu as I possibly can. I would imagine it's not going to be too long before I end up lapping the leaders. And so, coming up to the completion of what is now lap 24, still have another 11 laps to go before the end of this thing. And I'm also quite sure that whatever does happen from here, I'll presumably manage to win this by over a lap. At least I'll have over a lap on most of the field as I just spun out Cleland once again. And even if he did look like he had a shot at scoring points, that's basically become nowhere near the case now. And not even my teammate has been respectable to me, as I am trying to put him a lap down at the end of lap 25. He was not being very respectful there, but anyways. Getting into the back of one of the Nissans. I couldn't tell if that was Leslie or Reed who I got into the back of, but I definitely know it was one of the Nissans. As I now come up to the end of what should be lap 26 once I have made it through that sharp hairpin turn. It's a very sharp uphill bend, as I almost managed to overshoot the corner once again, but still able to keep a hold of my position. And that's now forced the other Nissan out of the way and into the gravel, as he was not prepared to give me the room. He paid the price for it. And so we will now have just 8 laps to go next time around, once I have made it up to the start finish line. and it would seem as though everything is going relatively smoothly at the moment. And now I have just 7 laps to go here at Knockhill. And then once those 7 laps are complete, this should now be win number 10 in the TOCA Showdown. So, with now only 7 laps to go here at Knockhill. I'd say everything is going pretty well at the moment, even though my frame rates are dropping significantly. But then again, I don't think it's really a major problem as long as the video footage manages to stay with me. I should also mention I'm getting quite sweaty, so I might have to take off my gown in a minute. But anyways. So, here we go then. I may have to check my frame rates again just to make sure it's nothing serious, but then if it is, I'm just going to stop the camera for a second and then just try and see if I can adjust it for these final 5 laps. So I'm over a quarter of a second up on my best lap time, or at least I was until that happened. And I plough into the back of one of the Hondas, but somehow I do not get penalised for it. Well, I guess that would explain why they call it Knockhill, because you're literally seeing yourself just knocking opponents out of the way. And yes, I can tell you that was pun intended, because we are literally at Knockhill, and technically, as well as this being a racetrack on a hill, it's also a racetrack that has plenty of knocking about, if that makes any sense. And yep, okay, I'm gonna have to pause my camera for a second. Okay, I think the issue now has been temporarily resolved. Although then again, frame rate issues are just something I have to deal with almost constantly when it comes to me playing 16-bit video games. Well, a bit more than that, but basically games with pretty much 240 to 480p in quality. You know, those sorts of games. And it looks as though I am now going to overlap at least one of the runners this time around. I can definitely see one of the Hondas who is just up ahead of me. And it doesn't look as though the frame rate issue is going to resolve itself. Oh well. And that could have gone a lot worse than it actually did. Technically speaking, of course. But, anyways. So, I think I have got my frame rate issue now temporarily resolved, but again, I guess it's just because my camera simply does not like recording. I guess it's just because since I'm using my laptop, it simply does not like recording long videos with games that have a quality output of presumably 240p or a maximum of 360 in progressive scan. Well, doesn't look as though I'm going to overlap Plato at this point, but I've overlapped most of the field here, and I am managing to at least keep myself in check with what's really required of me, whilst also having to make sure that I do not get involved in other people's messes. Of course, apparent as I might be in championship mode when I was driving the Vauxhall Vectra, I basically overlapped the entire field. And I set a new best lap time. And I forced Cleland off into the gravel trap again. But he somehow rejoins. And I would imagine if he wasn't pissed at me before, then he's gonna be pretty miffed at me now, the way I see it. I'm pretty sure he is going to be quite mad at me at this point. And trying my hardest to see if I can look for an opening. And they all let me go, so they must know their back markers on this occasion. I do manage to at least get myself up. And here it is, boys. Hold your breath and count to 10. 10 wins at Knockhill.
Once again, the new Audi driver has proven himself a winner. Here's the final positions.
Okay, so a bit more of a dominant lead compared to what I had previously. 27.6 seconds to Menu. Plato was third, followed by Thompson, Tarquini, Leslie, Bintcliffe and Rydell in the top 8. And then from 9th to 10th we had Kelvin Burt in the other Volvo and Anthony Reid, who would finish 10th in the end, scoring yet another point for Nissan, so it is fair to say Nissan is having a relatively good season for the B-tier teams. But anyways, let's move on to the points.
Now, after 2 great races, let's see the championship table. The new Audi driver is in the lead at this stage. Can he keep it up, I wonder?
Well, I hope so, Tiff. I mean, it wasn't easy for me to extend from a 2-point lead to what is now a 6-point lead. And that is now Knockhill done and dusted. So with that, let's move on to Snetterton.